Greetings, favorite students. This is Mr. Poley, and welcome to episode 4 of my flipped classroom videos, Origins of American Democracy, and how it had its roots in European history. We're still on VUS 2, that's SOL number 2 for American history. It's early America, early conflicts, and we're examining the three cultures: European, African, and First Americans, and how they all came to the Americas and how they interacted and what were the consequences of those interactions. Now, we can't forget the big picture. There was a massive redistribution of population from Europe and Africa into the Americas, and then this was all fueled by trade and the desire for new resources and products, and they were all trying to go to the Far East, India and China. Um, but in time, these colonies in the Americas uh, would get the ideas of representative government and religious tolerance, and over the next several centuries, it would inspire similar transformations in other parts of the world, other countries of the world. To recap, we have looked at the first Americans so far, the great explorers of the Age of Discovery, and we placed our first two major permanent English settlements: Jamestown in 1607 and Plymouth Colony in 1620, both of them founded for very different reasons. Jamestown being more of a commercial venture, Virginia Company of London after all, and the Plymouth Colony was founded by the Puritans, people seeking religious freedom. They wanted to purify their former religion, the Church of England, the Anglican Church. They wanted to come to the Americas and worship as they saw fit. Now, running colonies so far from Europe would present some problems for kings and queens. At first, Britain had a tradition of letting the local governments kind of govern themselves as they saw fit. This was present in the Virginia House of Burgesses, the first representative form of government, and the Mayflower Compact. At the Plymouth Colony, rather. Um, this was a direct democracy style form of government. Britain, being so far away, it lacked the resources and bureaucracy uh, to kind of approach this any differently. Um, Britain had come up with the idea that if they leave the colonies alone, for the most part, they would do well. This policy is what become known as salutary neglect. They were kind of leaving the colonies alone on purpose. They were neglecting them on purpose, uh, and this is how it kind of worked out. The local governments got used to doing things their own way, doing things on their own. As long as the king would let them do this, they would support the king. Later, after the 7 Years' War, the king's treasury, the king's coffers, were emptied after this long war between Britain and France, and the king had decided that he needed to collect a whole lot of taxes and institute a bunch of new regulations on the colonists. Um, this increasing of taxes and regulations would make the colonists very resentful, and it would make them so resentful that they decided that they would become ready to fight and demonstrate and to fight. This would evolve into what would become the American Revolutionary War. Now, the big trend, and this is what we're examining here, is the transition of power, democracy, and the development of the importance of the common man. The common man becoming more important than kings and nobility rather, had its roots in European history. So it used to be that at one point the kings had all the power, even the power of life and death, over ordinary citizens, over the common man. The common man had zero power. He was very much, uh, you know, at at the whim of kings and queens, and then gradually kings lose power and the common man gains more power, and until they kind of almost swap places. Um, Take a look at Athenian democracy. This is from 595 to 338 BC. The city-state of Athens develops a direct democracy in which all male citizens over age 21 could vote in their assembly. One man, one vote. They all had a vote and a say in how Athens was governed. This survived wars and plagues until Macedonia was conquered by Greece. Uh, Roman democracy, 509 to 27 BC. The city-state of Rome became a republic when its first law code, the 12 Tables, was made public. This form of representative government divided power between the General Assembly, controlled by the lower classes, and the Senate, controlled by the upper classes. Democracy in Rome would eventually die under Emperor Augustus in 27 BC. This is also very important. The Magna Carta, and this reinforces the point I just said a few slides back. The Magna Carta was King John in 1215 AD being forced to sign a document where he has to consult Parliament before raising taxes or declaring war. Parliament would eventually include commoners later on. Now, as I said, this is the king losing power and the common man gaining more. After all, in the case of war, this affects the common man very much because they're the people that have to fight in the war. And when you raise taxes, that affects the common people as well. So those two items or those two issues were among the forefront for the common man. The Protestant Reformation, a reduction of the church's power. It used to be that the Catholic Church was the main Christian church in the world, led by the Pope, kind of a de facto country. They had power over people in many different countries. And then this leads us to the Virginia House of Burgesses. It was, of course, where Jamestown was founded, 1607. This would be the first representative democratic body in America. The Mayflower Compact in Plymouth, Massachusetts. It was signed by 41 men who sailed on the Mayflower. This would foreshadow the first democratic, direct democracy-style government in America. This power is exercised in the local town hall meetings. Now, in previous episodes, Mr. Poley had a little slip up here. For some reason, I kind of got it fixed in my head that it was signed by 44 men. I originally had 41 written. Somehow I got in my head that it was supposed to be 44. And I took a second look at that, and it is indeed 41 men who signed this document. This is a very important document in early American history. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. So not only do we have the first two colonies getting involved with taking on principles of democracy, other states and other colonies rather would also come up with variations on this same theme. Thomas Hooker in Connecticut, 1636 to 1638, signs this document, grants democracy and religious freedom to its citizens. Rhode Island was founded upon similar principles. In Maryland, this was a colony founded with a whole bunch of Catholics. Maryland Act of Toleration, 1640 to 1649. Lord Baltimore of Maryland granted religious freedom. He had exploited an opportunity. After the Puritans in England, they defeated Charles I and they executed him, and he saw a chance to give people in Maryland religious freedom. The founding of Pennsylvania in 1681 was accomplished by the Quakers. This was done based upon religious toleration and democracy. The Quakers, an excellent example, and among the first people in America to come out against slavery. Origins of democracy in New England. The Glorious Revolution occurred 1688, 1689 in England. James II was ousted. Sir Edmund Andros is overthrown by Puritans in New England, and the Dominion of New England is formed. And of course, let's not forget the Salem witch trials in 1692. The Puritans of Massachusetts would conduct these trials uh, of suspected witches, and this just kind of showed of how intolerant their society was. Anybody who didn't worship the way they wanted, or didn't kind of agree with how they were doing things, was a dissenter, and dissenters were often labeled as witches. North and South Carolina, they split in 1712. Uh, the poor tobacco farmers uh, were split. They in what they became what would be North Carolina today, and the South Carolina aristocrats, the business class and the elite, they would become what is today South Carolina, and white settlers would soon expel Indians from the Carolinas. That was an early occurrence or happening there. Um, Freedom of the press. I know this is important. The trial of John Peter Zenger in 1734, 1735. He was a newspaper publisher, and this is another American democratic principle: freedom of the press. Zenger made accusations against royal officials in New York, and they weren't happy with it. He became acquitted because the accusations that he made were true, and this is one of the early victories for freedom of the press. Now, you have an assignment here. You need to compare and contrast Plymouth's direct democracy form of government with Virginia's representative democracy. You need to be sure to use examples from your last lesson as well as today. Also, to tell me which form you like best and why. Here you have your rubric. 10 points each. You have an introduction. You define Plymouth's direct democracy, define Virginia's representative democracy, and so on and so forth. Compare Plymouth to Athens, Virginia and the House of Burgesses to Rome, alongside the Magna Carta and other examples. Be sure to pay attention to all the details that I've covered in this episode. Thanks, and this concludes episode 4 of Mr. Poley's Flip Classroom videos.